Greetings. We welcome you to this panel. On behalf of the Promotional Committee, it is my honor to invite you to participate in the launch of the International Day of Scientific Culture, September 28th. We have organized a panel of science communicators from different parts of the world that will contribute their views on this subject. Finally, we invite you to participate. Thank you.
As President of the International Network for the Public Communication of Science and Technology, it's absolutely crucial that science is part of everyday life, and it already is part of our lives. From the time that we wake up to a digital alarm, perhaps on our smartphones, to when we put on the latest technology walking shoes, to when we have a meal grown in a scientifically thought out fashion, even to the realms of art and theatre, where science plays a role in developing the technologies that enhance those experiences. Science is part of our everyday life. However, it's important as citizens that we become conscious of how much it is part of our life, and that we discern and so that we can make better decisions, and that we get involved in discussions of how science advances. So in terms of being able to discern better about science, I think it's really important, given the wealth of information that's available online, that our citizens, our publics, are able to get on and discern what is legitimate information, what is information that's informed by credible science, as opposed to all that other sort of information. I think it's important that as science advances and offers us new options and new ways of dealing with things, that we are able to have the capacity to be involved in discussing that science and deciding how we want that science to help us. We have an equal voice in that discussion as science advances. And most importantly, understanding science and being informed by science helps us to make decisions that changes how we do our everyday living and how we make choices about our life. Science is part of our everyday life, and we need to be able to communicate with citizens to make that a powerful part of their lives. A scientifically educated person has, I think, three attributes. The first is that they are able to understand the way in which science proceeds and progresses. They understand the scientific method. They understand that science actually proceeds by disproving a hypothesis, that there's rarely black and white, that there are shades of grey and nuances. And I think that requires us as communicators to talk about failures as well as successes. The second thing I think that a scientifically educated person needs to be able to do is to be able to work out who is credible, who can be trusted. And that requires understanding the peer review process, understanding how scientists achieve credibility, but also understanding that there may be disagreement amongst scientists. And the third thing that I think is really important for a scientifically educated person is to be able to make informed, logical decisions about options related to risk. Now, if you think about the pandemic, this is a really important process. Many people judge risk based on their own personal experiences and whether they can control that risk or not. A scientifically educated person will be able to look at the pros and cons of each option at the risk levels and make an informed decision. This is really important if we're going to get people to accept the vaccines that have been proven to work And also if they are to make decisions about the medications and other things they choose to accept in their lives. I don't think a scientifically educated person knows how their television works or how radio waves move through the atmosphere. Rather, they know the process of science and are able to use and collect the information they need to make the decisions they need to make.
¿Por qué es importante que la ciencia se incorpore a la cultura y a la vida cotidiana de las personas? La ciencia es cultura, es conocimiento, es un tipo de conocimiento, es un tipo de acercamiento a la comprensión del mundo que los seres humanos llevamos practicando desde que estamos sobre la Tierra, porque lo que tratamos mediante la ciencia es de comprender cómo funciona el mundo para tener una vida más sencilla, más feliz, más fácil y para solucionar los problemas que tenemos. Lo hemos venido haciendo en el pasado, la ciencia ha solucionado muchos de los problemas que teníamos en el pasado y nos ha proporcionado herramientas para poder vivir mucho mejor en el mundo. Lo hace en el presente y lo hará en el futuro, con problemas que ya se nos están planteando y con problemas que todavía no sabemos que vamos a tener. Por eso es muy importante que tanto a nivel colectivo, a través de las autoridades y de las instituciones, como a nivel individual, incorporemos la ciencia a nuestra cultura y nos incorporemos nosotros y nosotras al discurso científico para poder tomar de forma adecuada las decisiones que nos van a llevar a solucionar nuestros problemas y a tener un mundo donde sea más sencillo y más intenso el ser feliz para una cantidad de la población cada vez más grande. Pero la ciencia no solamente es un conocimiento de cómo funciona el mundo para solucionar problemas, sino que la ciencia en sí misma es bella, es enriquecedora y por eso es importante que para vivir una vida más plena seamos también cercanos al conocimiento científico y a su belleza. ¿Qué significa que una persona sea científicamente culta? Que una persona sea científicamente culta significa que es capaz de incorporar los conocimientos científicos, la forma científica de ver el mundo, a su propia experiencia personal, junto con las artes y junto con las humanidades, y es capaz, por tanto, de enriquecerla, que conociendo personajes de la historia, conceptos científicos, desarrollos que ha habido, incluso el método científico, es capaz de experimentar la vida de una forma más intensa, más feliz, más rica y más enriquecedora también para los otros, también para los demás.
The history of science, from the ancient to the present day, has been all about the development that science has brought about. The applications of science have transformed our lives and are there for all of us to see. Very often, these applications raise legal, ethical, social issues which need to be addressed by social scientists, policymakers, interest groups of society. To address these issues, it is important that a dialogue be established between scientists and the rest of society. Science cannot be kept confined to an ivory tower. It would do more harm than good. Discussions between the world of science and the rest of the world will allow more solutions to emerge and will create a happier, more comfortable world. Very recently, we have seen in the management of COVID how science was critical to terms like the mask, social distancing, aerosol, immunity. If these terms are understood by the layman, solutions would be more forthcoming and we would be better equipped to handle any such problems that await us in the future. Hence, a science culture needs to pervade all across the world. Well, a scientifically educated person is one who is driven by a spirit of inquiry and logical reasoning. It's only scientific methodology that drives his decision making. Depending on his information that he identifies, which he retrieves and uses, he then analyzes this information to either validate or falsify any evidence that is seen around him. Now, all this is purely with a scientific bent of mind. It falsifies all kinds of prejudices and fancies and dogma. Thus, his approach is very objective and not subjective in nature. Now, a person with a scientific bent of mind is not necessarily a scientist by training. Therefore, he's a very balanced individual who approaches a problem from all dimensions with a simple aim of revealing the truth and arriving at the truth.
A ciência e a tecnologia são instrumentos fundamentais na sociedade atual. São essenciais para possibilitar uma melhor qualidade de vida para as pessoas e mesmo a sobrevivência de grandes parcelas da população e da própria humanidade, como fica evidente em uma situação de pandemia e diante do impacto das mudanças climáticas. A ciência é uma atividade social e faz parte da cultura e, neste sentido, e nos seus usos e aplicações, já está hoje profundamente inserida na vida cotidiana das pessoas. O desafio é integrá-la de forma que seja compreendida e usada de maneira mais profunda, adequada e justa. Uma questão importante é fazer com que ela seja melhor entendida, usada e compartilhada por todos e no interesse de todos. E não ser uma tecnociência excludente e um instrumento de exploração e de favorecimento de poucos, pessoas, empresas ou países, em detrimento de muitos. Por outro lado, não se combate negacionismos científicos de forma eficiente apenas com declarações sobre a importância da ciência. As pessoas devem ser convencidas disso, a partir de seu próprio aprendizado e de suas práticas, e fazendo com que a ciência seja um elemento essencial na melhoria das suas condições de vida e na ampliação de seus horizontes culturais. Por razões históricas, a humanidade, e em particular a América Latina, acumulou um enorme conjunto de desigualdades em relação à distribuição da riqueza, da terra, do acesso aos bens materiais e culturais, aos direitos humanos, à educação e à apropriação dos conhecimentos científicos e tecnológicos. A ciência deve ser, de fato, um elemento central e pode sê-lo na redução das desigualdades sociais, econômicas, de gênero, étnicas ou culturais e no cumprimento dos objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável. É importante para qualquer pessoa no mundo atual que ela possua uma noção sobre os principais resultados, métodos e usos da ciência, e também dos seus riscos e limitações, e dos interesses econômicos, políticos, militares, culturais que estão presentes em seus processos e aplicações. O significado social e cultural da ciência como atividade humana, socialmente condicionada e possuidora de uma história e de tradições, fica muitas vezes escondida nas ações educativas e nas atividades de divulgação científica. Por que estimular o maior conhecimento sobre a ciência e o estabelecimento de uma cultura científica na sociedade? Não se trata apenas de desenvolver na sociedade uma atitude favorável para a ciência e tecnologia. E não bastam apenas declarações oficiais de autoridades ou de acadêmicos em prol da cultura científica. É importante ir além das palavras e intenções, estabelecer políticas e ações que conduzam a um maior conhecimento e enraizamento da ciência junto à população em geral e também que seus usos sejam usufruídos por todos. Um elemento essencial é a melhoria da educação científica nas escolas, desde o nível fundamental, que estimule a curiosidade, a investigação e a capacidade criativa de crianças e jovens. É importante possibilitar que cada cidadão ou cidadã tenha a oportunidade de adquirir um conhecimento básico sobre a ciência e seu funcionamento, o que lhe dê condições de entender o seu entorno, de ampliar suas oportunidades de trabalho, de atuar individual e politicamente com conhecimento de causa. E também de contribuir para o desenvolvimento do senso crítico das pessoas. Outra ação relevante é ampliar e melhorar as atividades de comunicação pública da ciência, seja no uso mais amplo e adequado das redes sociais ou nos espaços de ciência. Os múltiplos atores que contribuem para isso, como os museus e centros de ciência e cultura, devem ser criados, apoiados e fortalecidos institucional e financeiramente. E é importante o aprofundamento da discussão coletiva sobre a cultura científica e sobre os usos efetivos da ciência. A ideia de uma cultura científica deve ser um horizonte para orientar políticas e ações em um esforço continuado e permanente em direção a uma ciência que esteja inserida na cultura e que também seja usada no interesse de todos, da humanidade e da vida em nosso planeta.
There's a classic definition of science literacy, which defines it as 3 parts: practical science literacy, civic science literacy, and cultural science literacy. These are the reasons why it's important to know something about science in everyday life. Practical science literacy, that's the stuff you need every day. Should you get your vaccines? How does your computer work? What do you need to know about keeping your car working? Civic science literacy are the things that we need to be able to fully participate in our democratic societies. So should we support policies for energy savings, or that will create more sustainable agriculture, or that invest in public health, or that invest in space exploration, or in basic research in biology, or any of those things, where we don't need to know the details, but we need to know what policies to support. The third one is cultural science literacy, and that's the one we don't talk about enough. We need cultural science literacy because science is a part of what it means to be human. It is as fundamental to our culture as music and art. And just as we think a person who is fully a member of our culture is someone who understands music or art in all their diversity, in all their glory, so someone should know something about science in all its diversity, in all of its glory, because science is one of the supreme achievements of the human mind. And so we need to understand it because it is part of what makes us human. To be scientifically educated means understanding that science is not just one thing. Science is a body of knowledge, science is a process, and science is a set of social institutions. As a body of knowledge, it's immense. There's no way you can know all of it. You need to know things that will be important for you in your life, that are relevant to you. So in some cases, that's parts of physics or biology or how those things come together. Science is a process. I don't mean the process that you hear about in school, the hypothesis, deduction, and conclusion. What I mean is the messy process, the way in which ideas flow and in which social processes are fundamental to how we produce knowledge, and the ways in which we trip over things and we muck about in the data and we talk about it with colleagues and we present it elsewhere. That's the real process of science. And finally, science is a set of social institutions. It is universities and government agencies and research companies and industrial companies that have research labs. And those institutions are also what we mean when we talk about science. So to be scientifically educated means understanding that saying the word science is actually not enough. We need to be clear about whether we're talking about science knowledge or science process or science institutions. And understanding that is what it means to be scientifically educated.